Hello, everybody. I'm going to have a presentation about how to measure the range and the quality of the cooperation between academia and business. We call it the Index of Higher Education Business Engagement. This is an instrument for monitoring university business relations. Maybe the word academia is better here, but in Europe we tend to say universities. Okay, so as you know and as you can imagine, this phenomenon, this cooperation between academia and business is a huge area, very complex one. It is very difficult to define it, especially to define it with a measurable parameters. But we are trying to do this, and we already have some successes in this field. I will show you how far we have gone with this, and so you will be able to evaluate if that makes any sense or not. So as I said, this is a very challenging task. So and some of the sociologists, at least in my country, they say that what we are doing, half of them would say that this is scientific. Some of them would say that it has nothing to do with science. So I'm not going to go into detail and into this debate if it is scientific or not. But anyway, we are trying to do it just to get a grasp of this phenomenon and to understand it better. Why do we need this? We want to illustrate the current situation and highlight good policy and practice in order to enable informed policy choices. Let me also say that maybe from American perspective it may seem a bit strange, because this cooperation between academia and business goes very smoothly, and there are a lot of good examples here, but it's not that obvious in Europe. So that's why in our case it is really very important to define this phenomenon, just to illustrate where we are at which stage. We also need to identify obstacles and drivers of university business cooperation, and we want to inspire policy focus among decision makers by demonstrating the importance of this kind of cooperation, especially that Europe is trying to catch up with the rest of the world, with US and with Japan, in this kind of competition, who is going to be more innovative and who is going to be, which economy is more innovation driven. So in order to grasp this phenomenon, to see what is the range and quality of the cooperation between academia and business, and how innovation is transferred from academia into business, how this relation helps general development of respective countries, and how it contributes to this development, we need to construct a kind of composite index, because as you can imagine, this phenomenon is very complex one, and if we want to define it by a set of different kinds of parameters, measurable parameters, by nature these parameters will be of different sort. Some of them will be quantitative, some of them will be qualitative. Some of them will be very easy to retrieve. The information about certain aspects will be easy to get, but in other cases it will be very difficult. So that's why we need to construct a kind of composite index comprising different kinds of parameters, which are measurable with different techniques. And then what we want to get at the end of the day is a kind of aggregated result, one result which will be at the same time very meaningful. So at the start it seems impossible that you have a very complex phenomenon, and then you want to present it with one final result, aggregated result. So as I said, those parameters which we have, we are building a kind of matrix of all the possible parameters, measurable parameters which describe this phenomenon. And some of them are qualitative, some of them are quantitative. Then we are going to aggregate the results, but also we need to have this possibility to decompose this result into individual areas or strands. I will show it in a moment. And the whole process is multi-layered and multifaceted, so that's why it makes the whole thing challenging and difficult. So first of all, we have to draw a kind of map. How this cooperation between academia and business, how it is represented, in which domains or areas. We call them strands, and in our case, we concluded that there are 5 strands. So research and the development, and then mobility, curriculum development, commercial activities, and social engagement. Within each strand, we have from 20 to 30 different measurable parameters which represent the strand. So examples of it. So for example, as far as research and development is concerned, for example, we look at number of joint and commissioned research activities, number of researchers involved, number and value of research agreements, and so on and so on. I'm not showing you the full map now, but it is ready, so if you are interested, we can share the whole document, which is the manual, which is quite thick, actually. These are only examples. And as I said, within each strand, we have from 20 to 30 measurable parameters identified. So altogether, we have 186 parameters, for which we are supposed to collect the data from respective universities which take part in the whole research. But we've already made a pilot research, and I will tell you how many universities and what are the results. So then mobility. So for example, we look at the number of academics working temporarily for business, number of business representatives working temporarily in the academia, number of student placements and internships, and so on and so on. At the end, I will tell you a few words about the challenges and how difficult the task is, but you can already see what are the challenges, because, for example, if we think about mobility, and this is in this case it is a quantitative parameter, you can say, what does it tell you? Mobility is not equal to another mobility. Somebody can spend 3 months or half a year in a university or in a company, but what is very important is what the person has done there and what is the achievement. So if we look at this only from the perspective of quantitative data, it won't tell us a lot. So we, apart from the quantitative data, we also need some further research on the quality of this. It's exactly the same as, for example, when you think about such a parameter like patent, the number of patents which result from the cooperation between academia and business. Patent does not equal another patent. Okay, so again, quantitative parameter will not tell us a lot, but it's the beginning of the discussion anyway. So then for the curriculum development, we look at number of joint study programs and students enrolled, number of joint trainings, and the value of certification services provided for business, number of joint degrees, and so on and so on. Commercial activities, number and value of patents, what I mentioned a moment ago, and licenses, number and sustainability of spin-offs, spin-outs, and startups, commercialization of research results and value of consulting activities, and so on. Then social engagement, for example, common non-profit activities carried out jointly with business in the field of poverty eradication, social integration, labor market, health protection, security, sports and culture, and so on. So as you can see, sorry, once again. So this is our matrix, this is our map of all the parameters which we think define this phenomenon of cooperation between academia and business. And we think that this map, this matrix is comprehensive, and it embraces all the possible representations of and situations in which academia and universities cooperate together. Okay, and now when we collect the data, so far we have carried out the research in 20 different universities, not only in our country but also in 3 other countries as well. It was Poland, it was Macedonia, it was Kazakhstan and Turkey. Now we are finalizing our cooperation with the Netherlands. So we are spreading with this idea and adding more countries. So, but so far we have collected the data from 20 different universities, and what we get as a result is a kind of profile. This is a hypothetical profile of country X. So, for example, if in a given country we collect the data from 10 or 20 universities and we sum them up, then that would be the profile of a respective country. But now, obviously, we are not at the stage that we can profile the country, because, as I said, we have only 20 universities. So we rather talk here about the results from respective universities, or we can talk about the result, aggregated results from those 20 universities. And so this is a hypothetical profile, for example, of a country X, if we have a lot of universities taking part, or it can be also the profile of a single university. So if we assume that this is the result of those 20 universities, aggregated result of those 20 universities in which we have carried out our research, then it would mean that in most of them, that almost all of them score quite high in research and development, not so high in mobility. And now what we face here are 2 methodological issues: external validity and internal validity. So we are not at this stage now, but the perfect situation would be that we establish certain benchmarks. Like, for example, the benchmark for mobility would be that, for example, each student from the academia, from the university, should have a kind of internship or some kind of training during the university course. Should spend at least a few months in business, getting some experience, work experience, and so on and so on. So if we establish such a benchmark, so then this result would mean that a respective university or a bunch of universities do not adhere in 100% to this benchmark, but something like 50%. Okay. So if we establish such benchmarks, then we would say that we will have a kind of external validity. Now, so far, we do not have those benchmarks. It would be at this stage very difficult to establish those external benchmarks for all these all these strands. But we are hoping that we will be able to do it when we get experience with more and more data collected from different universities from different countries. But so far, it is like we are talking here like about internal validity. So it means that if this is a profile of University X, one of those 20, for example, hypothetically, so then it means that this university, the score of this university within the strand of mobility is something like the average of those 20, okay? And then when we have the results, whatever it is, if it is a country profile or if it is a university, individual university profile, then we can compare the data. We are not going to rank the universities or countries, that's not our aim. What we want to achieve is to foster the debate and exchange of good practice between universities or countries. And for example, if these are two hypothetical profiles of two different countries, then they could exchange practices. Country X, let's say, is scoring better in research and development, but at the same time country Y is scoring better in mobility. So they can exchange their practices and they exchange their views on this. So we rather want to foster the debate and exchange of good practices instead of ranking universities or countries. Okay, I've already mentioned a few of the problems, methodological problems, issues and challenges. So first of all, the most important thing is the theoretical framework. So what we face here is good operationalization of the whole process. So it means that we need to achieve a kind of construct validity. In order to achieve the good construct validity, high construct validity, we need to be sure that all the strands or domains or areas we have identified, that they form a comprehensive and full picture and full view of possible cooperation between academia and businesses. And then we have to be sure that individual parameters which are categorized within all these domains, that the list of these parameters is also as extent as possible, and that these parameters can be measured somehow. So that's one thing. We hope that the matrix that we propose is a good one. We compared it to quite a few other models which already exist. For example, one of them was developed by the European Commission. We are not so much satisfied with this. We don't think that it covers all the possible elements. But maybe if you are interested and if you look further and more in depth into our work, maybe you can also suggest something else and show us that our model still lacks something. But this is a kind of open model. We are still working on it and adding new elements as a result of different debates and discussions, for example, like this one. So the first thing, very important one, is the theoretical framework. And we want to be sure that this whole matrix, the whole map, is a good one. Then data selection, which is the obvious result of this. But also multivariate analysis is a very important factor here. So we need to be sure that the structure of the parameters, that the data, that the parameters which represent it are suitable. And as I said, I already discussed the issues of internal and external validity. So far, we cannot relate the results to any external benchmarks because they need to be developed. They do not exist. But we think that because of the fact that we already had this pilot phase with those 20 universities, we already can guarantee a kind of internal validity. Then what we will encounter for sure is missing data problem. Not all the data, not all the parameters which we have here and the data standing behind them can be retrieved from different universities or countries. This is a common problem when you think about composite indices, especially if you apply them to big phenomena like this. Then we need to think about normalization of the data, but in our case, this is a kind of spider graph. So this is how we present the data, how we want to make it informative to the outer world, not only to specialists, but also to policymakers and to people who are interested. And then the problem of weighting and aggregation. Obviously, not all the parameters can be weighed in the same way, because they have different their importance to the whole phenomenon is different. How to weigh it? We don't know it, but we are going to invite a panel of experts who will tell us in an open debate how to weigh it and how many points to give to this parameter or to that parameter. Okay, it must be debated. Not all the parameters are equal in that respect. We need to think about robustness and sensitivity. So, on the one hand, it must be very clear and transparent, but on the other hand, for example, some of the data cannot be well for some of the universities. For example, we sign a contract that some of the data is not going to be published. I mean, some part of the data, because from the point of the university, they do not want to expose it. Yes, that's obvious. Not all the data can be. Yeah. Yep. Actually, I'm about to finish. So yeah. And obviously, we have to think about the links to other variables. So that's what I said. I mentioned external validity. We also have to make a research and to see, because obviously the research in this field, or different kinds of researches in this field exists, and people already collect different kinds of data. And if we identify that, for example, some kind of data is already gathered and it can be trusted, we will and it's public, we will use it. We don't want the universities to we don't want to put a lot of burden on the universities. For example, collecting the data for all these 186 parameters that we have takes from 2 to 3 weeks as far as one university is concerned. So it takes quite a while, and we do not want to make too much burden on the shoulders of universities, but at the same time, this is a kind of compromise. We want to collect, we want to be reliable, but at the same time, we do not want to put too much burden and stress on the universities which take part in the research. Okay, and obviously there are some limitations of this exercise, because at the end of the day, when we aggregate everything, it may lead to some misleading policy messages. We want to avoid it. We want to avoid some simplicity when policymakers look at this. They may use it, for example, for rankings, and we already know from some of the universities that they are afraid that if they give us this kind of data, then the authorities will use it against them, and, for example, will rank them. If these are state universities, maybe they will be punished financially on the part of the state. There are different worries and threats here. As you can see, the complexity of the whole thing is quite high, and data collection is problematic, and we also want to avoid manipulation of the index. But in order to avoid, certain problems, as I said, we will create a panel of experts when we have the index of a kind of group or bunch of universities, we will come again, we will gather them, and we will discuss the data. Then we will still get some feedback for them, just to refine our tool and just to fine-tune it. And that's the same with the index of a respective country. When we get it, then we hope it will start a kind of national debate, and it will still also help us to to develop our tool and make it better. The methodology we are using is not anything new. It has already been used within Language Rich Europe Index. It is the exercise within European countries, and the information and the data which is collected there is going to serve policymakers to learn how respective countries in Europe, to what extent they are friendly to languages in different domains. How languages are taught at schools and universities, how languages are treated in the public domain. For example, if you are a foreigner and if you come to Poland, will you be able to communicate with a policeman? Will you be able to, for example, to communicate with a ticket machine at at the bus station, and so on and so on? Very huge thing. Also including a lot of different domains, and we've already done it, and I was privileged to be part of it. And the other one is Migrex Index. I have nothing to do with this, but we were inspired by this methodology. It was first used there, and this index is very successful. I think that they already have a kind of 5th or 6th round of it. They collect the data every second year, and this index is telling the people how respective countries in Europe are friendly to migrants. If there are legal provisions, what are the conditions, and so on and so on. Also very huge and complex thing. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Pawel. Very nice.